Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Facebook Live. I'm Dr. Narda Robinson, veterinarian and osteopathic physician, and founder and CEO of CuraCore Vet. Today, we're going to talk about the scared yet sacred Pez Anserine. What's a Pez Anserine? Well, Pez means foot, and Anserine means goose. So we're talking about the goose's feet that are represented in Before we get started, just a reminder, this is for information only, and I am not your physician, though I am a physician, so if you have problems, consult her or him. And I am a veterinarian, but I am not your veterinarian, so if this is for your animal, consult her or him. But for our mainstream CuraCore community, we are talking about a set of structures that we've often described before. And there are so many connections, and it has so much importance in stifle or knee integrity and just best function of all the coordinating elements, that's what makes it sacred. But what makes it scared is that there are people with sharp instruments that want to move it and cut bone. So we're talking about the, to me, in my opinion, dreaded TPLO, tibial plateau leveling osteotomy. And again, if you've been in my courses, you've heard me talk about it, but I've also written about it in Veterinary Practice News, and we've done webinars on it, the 10 troubling truths of the TPLO, and so on. So let's go back, though, and see what makes the Pez Anserine, the goose's foot, sacred. Here is the human limb, and this is the sartorius muscle. So we're coming from lateral in the ilium and coming medially and ending up on the medial aspect of the knee for the human, the knee. And so it's going to come down and get attachment distally right there. What acupuncture point is that for those of you who have been through my medical acupuncture for veterinarians course or my human colleagues? Anybody know in the comments? Spleen 9, okay, just distal to the medial tibial condyle. But we have these two others. Now, we remember that the sartorius muscle, it's called the sartorius because that means tailor. So when we cross our legs, when we make a lap for the cat to climb in, or tailors used to sit down and cross their legs and then do their sewing in their lap. So that's what this muscle does. It helps to flex the hip and flex the knee. And so in some ways, it could also help extend it, depending on which part of the muscle is being activated at the time. An interesting thing to know, though, that I saw in the Travell and Simon's book, the Trigger Point Manual, which is the Trigger Point Bible, but also have seen echoed in the veterinary literature, is that the Pez Anserine, like many of these other long muscles, don't have fibers that just attach end to end. And so there are sometimes little tendinous inscriptions along here or short strips of muscle. It's been seen in the cat too. It hasn't been investigated so much in the dog, but short strips of muscle combined with longer fibers. And this happens also with the semitendinosus that's coming from here. So it's kind of a newsflash, because when you have long muscles, it would be hard for the body, the neuromuscular coordination to deal with contracting the whole long line all at once. So it has certain parts that can contract based on what the needs are. And this, again, reinforces the importance of the central nervous system in the control over joint integrity. So if we think about that and we think about trigger point dysfunction in the sartorius, what's going to happen? Well, depending on where the trigger point is, it's going to cause pain anywhere along the line. or there might be a focal taut band that doesn't go from end to end. That reinforces the issue about needing to palpate from end to end, which reinforces the message that we need to palpate, we need to know where muscles are, and we need to palpate them from origin to insertion. So with the sartorius, we're coming from the ilium and inserting down on the medial tibial condyle area. Okay, now behind that, you can see this muscle here. This is the gracilis muscle. And this is a broad, flat muscle. It's not that thick, it's rather thin, but is attaching from the pelvic symphysis, not the pubic symphysis, but the pelvic symphysis, down to, again, this same area. And now that we're teaching so many clay building classes, we can see that, okay, there's something important here to note, and that is that if we were going to construct this on a skeleton with clay, on a plastic skeleton, then what would we put there first? Well, we would certainly put the gracilis before the sartorius, because the gracilis, as you can see here, is deep to the sartorius. So that's important to note. And we'll look at the canine model in a bit. And so the sartorius muscle is supplied by the femoral nerve, and the gracilis muscle is supplied by the obturator nerve. So already we have two tendons that are coming from the medial aspect of the thigh and from the craniolateral, anterolateral aspect of the thigh, and joining together here distally. So that's pretty important in terms of bringing together communication from different parts of the pelvis and different nerves that are supplying them. What's the third tendon? That's the semitendinosus tendon here. So that is a hamstring muscle starting on the human on the ischial tuberosity, and then going all the way down, fairly tendinous, and inserting again. Now this, we can see that's a fairly deep muscle. That is deeper even to the sartorius insertion. So that is supplied by the tibial portion of the sciatic nerve. So now we have some of that sacred quality for the pes anserine, which is 3 different muscles from 3 different sections of the pelvis. So for the semitendinosus, we're coming from the caudal or dorsal part of the pelvis at the back, then medial with the gracilis, and anterolateral or craniolateral with the sartorius. What do you think this does functionally? Well, it's bringing together information about forces from 3 different aspects, nearly the whole pelvis, and converging in this sacred area with 3 different muscles, 3 different nerves supplying it. So it would make sense to somebody that approaches medicine from let's cultivate health and not destroy things unless we need to, that if we did have instability in the knee or perceived instability, that first we would do a myofascial exam on the entire structure and see, are there referred pain problems from any of these that are causing like a nociceptive inhibition of joint function. And if there's myofascial trigger points, then we treat them. If there's underfiring of, let's say, the hamstrings, which the biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus, which are agonists of the cranial cruciate, if that's what's being implicated, then we support those. We get those firing so that they can keep the tibia where it needs to be instead of translating forward or cranially. So there's so much that we can do before we bring to bear a sharp object and think that we're going to cut the tibia, as is done with the TPLO, lift off these tendons and cut the bone, and then replace it so it looks more like the human conformation. So let's take a look at the dog model. Okay, good, did it. All right, as we've seen before, the quadruped is far more complex than the human is. So I've got my muscles here. One thing that we can notice is that there are extensions down to the calcaneus. And so this is the lateral view. The red is the sartorius. And that's not just attaching to one site on the ilium. In the dog, there are actually two parts. There's a cranial part and a caudal part. And it's the caudal part that we see attach down to the pes anserinus. And so what we're looking at here is the cranial portion, and that is actually inserting on muscle tissue, so the rectus femoris and the vastus medialis. So what is that doing functionally? That is creating communication between this muscle and the quadriceps, because we didn't have in the pes anserine, we didn't really have representation from the quadriceps. But because of this communication, we're talking about fascial and neural and mechanical exchanges and interrelationships. But so then when we want to think about the caudal group, then we're actually looking at the confluence of all of them. Let me see if I can. Okay. So what do we have here? So the red is the cranial and caudal portions of the sartorius, supplied by the femoral nerve. Some sources will say saphenous nerve, but it's really the saphenous nerve, from what I've read, and being consistent with the human, is a sensory nerve branch from the femoral. Anyway, green is gracilis. So remember that was the medial muscle coming from the pelvic symphysis, and it's not only inserting on the pes anserine, but it's actually coming down and adjoining with the, zoom out a little bit, it's actually coming down the cranial aspect of the tibia, the entire cranial aspect of the tibia, with a fascial connection. What is this telling you already? Well, the extensions, unless they just haven't looked at this in the human, and the dog research is more obvious, but we see here that we have the gracilis, the insertion on the pes anserine, and going all the way down the cranial aspect of the tibia. And then what's this? We have a green component in the calcaneal tendon. And that's different from the human as well, because the calcaneal tendon in the human is mainly created by the gastrocnemius and the soleus muscle, which is absent in the dog, present in the cat, because cats are so much like people. But so here's so much relevance when we think of what is our connective tissue support for stifle integrity, and stifle integrity that is being manifested not only by one little cranial cruciate ligament, but by extensive fascial, myofascial interconnections and communications. So this is where and why we should start with integrative rehabilitation, acupuncture, massage, photomedicine, instead of a sharp object. Okay, so lastly, we have, what muscle is this? Remember, it's the sartorius, it's the gracilis, and does anybody know? And the semitendinosus. So in blue, we have the semitendinosus, and coming down from the ischial tuberosity, inserting on the medial aspect of the tibial condyle, like we've already said, and sending a pretty pronounced piece down to the calcaneal tendon. So functionally, what is that doing then? We're again bringing information all over. The calcaneal tendon is very important for just the maintenance of the position of the tarsus, but also the whole limb, and giving that springy sensation and capacity when running. So look at this entire just display of the pes Anserine, the attachments, what contributes to it. It's like a bridge almost with tensegrity on it, the way that it is being held together and interacts with the stifle. On the back here, I created in white, so this was another aha, the thoracolumbar fascia. So different from the human as well is that we don't just have one little attachment to the ilium, but we actually have engagement with the thoracolumbar fascia, which is coming from the thorax, but we know that that has vast interrelationships with other spinal muscles, with the latissimus dorsi, which inserts on there. So that's bringing in the thoracic limb. It's just part of the unity of the body, and why I think that it's imperative that we not be cutting pieces and reshaping them and then throwing off all the mechanics that have an intrinsic homeostasis that we could, at least at first, try to support and to help it recover. So two big key points: the pes anserinus, goosefoot, is sacred, and it's like a grand central station of information from the pelvis down to the tarsus and down to the tibia and even the back, the thoracolumbar fascia. So grand central station, let's keep it sacred and not make it scared. The other thing is that this is a palpation destination, and this is where we can start palpating. We can start and see if there's tenderness to palpation. Maybe something has gone wrong. Maybe the semitendinosus isn't firing as much as it should, because as I've mentioned before, somebody lives in an apartment, or they don't let their dog jump and run and do whatever. There's no cause for that semimembranosus to act. Or maybe there's something wrong with the sciatic nerve, and we can palpate that. And we're palpating the entire length of that. Maybe there are issues medially, and the gracilis isn't firing well. You know, it's just wherever it is. Now that you know that this is a palpation destination, that's where we can start. And if we find sensitivity, if we find tenderness to palpation here, that should be an aha moment also. And you start treating that with your acupuncture, with your photomedicine, with your massage, after you have kind of analyzed all the other extents of the muscles all over the place, along with the other entire patient, and go from there and make your decisions. What I would not do is send them right to the orthopedist and just kind of have them do their thing. Not that they all cut, not that they're cutting the pes Anserine. They're using, surgical methods and just kind of moving it out of the way. But as we move it out of the way, we're disrupting communication. And a disturbed pes Anserinus is not a happy pes Anserinus. So if you have questions, give us an email, info@curacore.org. And just to let you know that we're going to move into another phase of things for a while. And I have a course opening up, and it's called Myofascial Relationships of Acupuncture Points in the Dog. We've run this course on site, and it was a tremendous amount of fun. And you can use a skeleton, like you see here in the picture, is the same one that I have been working with. And whether you're an acupuncturist or not, you're eligible to come and join us. It's for vets and vet students and veterinary technicians. And we'll consider others as well. But we're going to be building muscles on the dog either with a skeleton you can purchase elsewhere online or through the Canikin Anatomy in Clay people. And this will be a fully online at your own pace series where we will be starting with the well, we're starting with the head. Let me get back to this. All right, we're starting with the head and neck and all the complexity for the neck and the facial muscles and the relevance of the acupuncture points for those sites. So the muscles, the nerves, the bones, any fascia or glandular stuff. So how does acupuncture work? Well, it is engaging with these structures, and that's how it's producing the indications that we're so accustomed to seeing with acupuncture. But this is going to explain it. I mean, how many of you know how many layers there are at the back of the neck? Because there are a lot. And then that's section 1, and that's at your own pace. And then section 2 is the trunk. So the thorax and the abdomen. And then we're going so that's section 2. Section 3 is the pelvis and tail. And then section 4 are the limbs, thoracic and pelvic limbs. And so I will be releasing some of the videos from that compilation as we go through them so that you can see how it's all coming along. But registration is open. So go ahead and visit our website at CuraCore.org. And it's a course under the acupuncture section. So thanks for joining me today. Keep those Pez Anserines sacred. Till next time.